there's this idea at the moment in the world that you need to become a top 1% man, right? And the real tragedy of, the current male socioeconomic, spiritual and cultural climate is that we don't really learn from the right people. The problem with young guys in this day and age is most of them haven't read a book in like 5 years. And if they have, it's like a book on testosterone or it's a book like how to become a top 1% man. Well, I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous. And I'm going to explain why. Reading books like that, reading any book that is about someone or has been published in the last like 20 years, unless it's by Robert Greene, is kind of a silly idea, right? There are books that I read that have been published recently, but the point I'm going to make here is simple, right? If you want to be a top 1% man, right, this indicates that you're better than, basically 99 other men, 1 in 100. But what I like to do, instead of studying people who are in the top 1% of men, like you could argue like Imran Gaji or Hamza or Hormozi or Sam Evans or Alex Becker, guys who have made multi-8 figures online, have an audience, they have the, ability to communicate and stuff, and they're in the top 1%, they're better than maybe even top 0.1%, right? You could argue that if you're at 8 figures, you're probably in the top 0.01%, you're better than 10,000 people, probably even more, right? But here's what I would suggest. Stop watching YouTube videos like this one. Stop reading books on how to be a top 1% man or the way of the modern man or any of this crap, and start studying the top 0.000000001% of men, right? If you want role models and you want to learn from people, stop studying anyone who's talking about anything in this current day and age unless they've done something super significant, right? Now, what do I mean by this? Well, conveniently, I've got some props for you, right? Don't study the top 1% man or the way of the modern man, or I don't even know what the title is. Do you know what books I'm talking about? These books that you've probably read, like How to Win Friends and Influence People and, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, all this new age knowledge, it's all BS. It has its place, the 4-hour work week, all these books are just, it baffles me that you spend your time reading a book published by someone that makes a couple of million a year when you could read the literal words of Charles Darwin or Napoleon or Caesar. And I hope you see where I'm going with this. You want to learn to study the top 0.00001% of men. You want the 1 in every 100 million. There's only a few of them, right? You've got people like Churchill, people like Warren Buffett, people like Caesar, Napoleon, Cicero, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan. The list can literally go on. There's probably about 300 people that I actually look up to, right? You want to study the people throughout history that are so rare that their genius is completely unparalleled. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples, right? So instead of reading your new age BS and watching YouTube videos by people that have only made a little bit of money, why don't you read Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway Letter to Shareholders? From when he was basically broke all the way to when he was like worth 50 billion, right? Maybe you should read about the British Empire, one of the biggest and most successful empires to have ever existed in the history of the world. If you want to get girls, stop reading about how to make 10K a month and start reading about how to conquer the world. Stop all of this new age rubbish. Put the stuff you put into your brain. If you want to learn how to fight and you want to learn how to overcome other men and submit people to your power, stop reading crap. Read Caesar's commentaries. Read Napoleon's memoir. You can literally read the words that Charles Darwin wrote. Do you have any idea how much of a privilege you have to be able to read the words of bloody Charles Darwin or any of these great men? You can read the words of Jung. You can read the literal words of Socrates, Epictetus, Caesar, Napoleon, Alexander the Great. It baffles me that you've got the ability to read about Columbus, you've got the ability to read about the works of Shakespeare. You can read about what Einstein said, what Newton said. All of these prolific men, and there's obviously some women like Queen Victoria and stuff as well. They're all of these people you can read about, but you don't. Do you have any idea how crazy that is? You're so tied up in studying, how to become a top 1% man and make 10K a month online that you completely forgot to read about the single person that literally founded one of the most important theories in the history of the world, right? You spend your time, reading about you know, how to get to 10K a month with SMMA, when you could be reading people like Rockefeller or Andrew Carnegie, you know, or JP Morgan. Let's not forget about him. You could be reading about Alexander the Great and how he literally conquered all the Persians in the known world before anyone else did. You could be reading about Genghis Khan and how he basically took all of his local tribes and conquered literally all of Asia, Eurasia, and the known world. You know, it baffles me. You could be reading about Napoleon, one of the greatest commanders of all time. You could be reading the actual works of the founding father of psychology, Carl Jung. You know, you could be reading works by Plato and the ancient Stoic philosophers. You could be reading about the actual Republic. You could be reading about Socrates. You could be reading Epicurus, although it's maybe up for debate whether it is any good or not. But, you know, stop doing it. Stop reading all of this new stuff. You know, read about Elon Musk, you know, read Nietzsche, read Schopenhauer, read, for crying out loud, even just read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. You can read the literal words of the most powerful man in the world. You know, Sun Tzu's The Art of War is another example. You know, you're putting yourself at such a disadvantage by studying this new age knowledge that has basically just been filtered down and filtered down and filtered down, you know, from the OGs, right? A couple more examples. You know, you can read about Michael Jordan, arguably the best athlete to have ever existed ever, right? You could read about how Nike was founded. You could read about how Apple was founded, about how Google was founded. You could read the letters to shareholders for Amazon, the letters to shareholders for any major public company since the initial, you know, genesis of that thing, you know. You could read Made in America by Sam Walton, the autobiography of the richest man alive in America at his moment in time. You can read his thoughts and his words. Do you have any idea how insane that is? Do you have, this is the thing, people just don't seem to comprehend the privilege they have. If you have an ability to read and you have enough money to buy books, all the answers, they all lay in these books. You can read the words of actual billionaires, but instead you sit and you study people who are making 100 grand a month. I'm including myself in this, right? I'm preaching to the choir. I make like $1 million a month. And I'm articulate enough to make some videos and make them shiny and how to do this, that. But stop wasting your time. Like, sure, this might seem counterintuitive because I'm telling you to stop watching my YouTube channel, but stop studying new money. Stop studying new age, new money, new knowledge. Read the old stuff. Read the guys that have really got it figured out. You know, you could study Graham. If you don't know who this guy is, he basically, like, sort of big guy in the American Revolution. He came in and basically ended up becoming president all whilst he was still drunk, right? You know, it's just unbelievable. You could read the Everything Store, you could read Jeff Bezos, you know, it's just like, you know, it's just crazy. You know, there's so many like great men. You could read Washington, you can read Columbus, you could read Abraham Lincoln. You know, this is why I like Robert Greene as an exception. Robert Greene's books are really good because they're basically just history. Like, you need to read history. If you don't, I'm sorry to say, but you're just an idiot. You know, what really denotes stupidity and idiocy is an ignorance to the past events, because human nature, by its nature, is extremely predictable, reliable, and consistent, right? It's like a system. We just seem to repeat the same stuff over and over again. And if you read history and you read the biographies and you read the words of the great men who make these predictions, you can start to actually organize your life in a coherent, proper way in alignment with the paradigms of the greatest and most successful men on the planet. You know, for example, you know, if you want to learn how to communicate and how to speak, you know, maybe you're watching some YouTube videos like how to become more articulate and you watch a cute little TED talk, go and study Cicero, arguably the greatest orator to have ever existed in the entire history of mankind. He could literally move mountains with his words. Like, probably one of the most successful political operators in ancient Rome before the revolution, before Caesar basically took over and fought Pompey. But that's another person you could read, is Pompey. You know, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name properly, but one of the greatest commanders, generals in the Roman era. You know, read Hannibal. Like, it's just insane to me that in this day and age, you have the option to read the literal words of someone like Darwin, someone like Galileo, someone like Pythagoras, you know, but instead you choose to have the shiny object syndrome to the penguin label, or, you know, oh, but, you know, this, like, there's some new books that are very good and relevant. Like, Alex Hormozy's recent books are really good. Principles by Ray Dalio, super good book. You know, Poor Charlie's Almanac was published recently. Also, I'm not just trying to, like, you know, demean the knowledge of any book that was published recently, but I just find it incomprehensible that you have the option to read the words of billionaires, geniuses, one-of-a-kind idiosyncrasies, and instead you choose just to watch the words of, you know, someone on YouTube who knows how to make 10K a month. Like, there's a time and a place for YouTube videos because, you know, you might find a lot of use in them. But this is also why I really admire Sam Ovens, you know, because for Sam with consulting.com, when he was building his business, he never looked at what the competition was doing. It was never about what Traffic and Funnels was doing or what Grant Cardone was doing or what Ty Lopez was doing. He was never trying to get competitive advantage by studying his competition. He studied the greats. He studied Amazon. He studied Google. He studied all these, you know, Carl Icahn, Warren Buffett, like Charlie Munger. Like, you can read, like Poor Charlie's Almanac, for example, like an actual book written by an actual billionaire. It just baffles me. If you want to learn to make money and you want to learn to become great and you want to become successful, just go to the purest source of knowledge you can find, right? It doesn't make any sense to me why you'd pay attention to anything else. This video, obviously, like, you know, sure, you might want to listen to some of the stuff I have to say, but I'm trying to just make this point that you have such a privilege, and that is the privilege of studying the great men and great women throughout history. And you know, my objective now for my studying and my reading and my learning is basically to read the biography or autobiography of every single great person to have ever lived. That's going to take a long time. That's an entire life's work. But in the process, I might be able to part my knowledge onto you and, you know, share what I've learned throughout these books, because these videos, the quality of these videos depends on the quality of the lessons that I've learned. And coming back to what I said earlier about Sam Ovens and stuff like that, like, if people want to go in the comments and say Charlie's just a replica of Sam, I don't care. You know, it's the same accusation that people gave to Amazon in the early days. Like, you're just trying to copy Walmart. Jeff was like, yeah, and what? Thanks. Like, you know, of course I'm trying to copy Walmart. Like, I run an info business, right? And who's the best person and the most successful person in the info business space, at least the high ticket info business space, who had the most scale with the most profitability? It was Sam Ovens, right? Of course I'm going to copy him. Of course I'm going to emulate him. I have absolutely no shame or quarrel in any way, shape or form with the idea of trying to emulate the person that mentored me and got me to 8 figures. And you shouldn't either. You know, it baffles me that people get offended by someone copying someone. You know, I get it, like, you want to give them credit and stuff like that, but also you've got to realize that all of Sam's ideas came from somewhere. You know, he had some very unique philosophical and, you know, practical insights that I'm sure he came up with on his own, as I have in my videos, for example, a couple of times. But most of the stuff that he learned came from studying other great people, right? So it's kind of like, I'm not really copying Sam, I'm probably copying Socrates in certain instances, right? You know, so just next time you go to buy a book, next time you go to listen to a podcast, next time you go to watch a YouTube video, next time you choose who to follow online, just think about this rule. Don't try and follow the top 1% or the top 0.1% or the top 0.01% of men or women. Follow the top 0.00, like the one in every 100 million. You know, it's kind of like, it's like, you know, there's 4 really prominent conquerors throughout history. You've got Napoleon, you've got Genghis Khan, you've got Caesar, you've got Alexander the Great. Now, there's obviously a lot more like Pompey in Roman times or Hannibal, or there's a ton of other, you know, great military leaders throughout history that you'd also want to study. But like, they are like great generals like that, great military commanders that truly know how to conquer and bend the actual world, the physical world, to their will and manifest the future that they perfectly want and literally take everything from everyone. Like, they're like 1 in a billion. And you can study them. Like, you know, right now, the book that I'm reading, let me see if I can find it. Oh, ironically, it's over here, so hang on. So right now, I'm reading about Caesar, right? I've studied him in the past, but I'm reading about, you know, how he revolutionized Rome and everything. And like, it's just, I'm struggling to communicate this point. Like, you can literally study the greatest people to have ever lived ever, and take that knowledge and synthesize it into your business, into your everyday life, and use it to gain incredible, ridiculous leverage and asymmetric advantage over your competitors. So I just want to make this video. I hope it doesn't seem like too much of a rant. Stop studying all this. Stop buying books just because they're a New York Times bestseller. Look at the ones that have stood the test of time and study the top 0.000000001% of people. Because if you do that and you learn from them, you know, the quality of your life is really determined by the quality of information that you receive, because all we really can do with life is synthesize information that we've received. you know, all the decisions you make, all the thoughts you have, really it's all just going to come from the stimuli you've exposed yourself to in the form of information. So if you're filling up your head with all this BS new age information that's just been filtered down and Chinese whispered into basically lies and idiocy, you know, from an original source of truth, you're obviously going to be in for some trouble. So I hope this video finds you well. I hope you find it useful, and I'll see you in the next one.